I forgot in the year or two since the last time I was out on a VW bus trip how cold your feet can get in the off-season. Buses aren't sealed like modern vehicles, there are just open holes in the floor where the pedals move through, and under that, just an armor plate to protect the cables that reach all the way back to the engine and transmission in the rear.
9 million years ago, recently, the uplifted dome of gypsum collapsed. Finally, 24,000 years ago, mere seconds ago really, an ice age brought unusual levels of water to the desert. The gypsum would erode, blow into the mountains lining the valley, accumulate, and then get washed down into the valley by rain, where the water would evaporate again and form crystals. In this way, the ancient seabed did not erode, but reformed over and over and over again. It reformed into a waterless beach of pure gypsum. These dune fields are called the White Sands National Monument, and this particular type of gypsum dune field is so rare that there are barely a half dozen of them the world over. This one in New Mexico is one of the youngest, forming around 8,000 years ago. It's still growing. It's one thing to talk about all the peculiars of geology that had to conspire to create the field, and it's another to actually put your toes in the sand and rub the crusty remnants of a vanished ocean from your eyes.
But in the 1850s, going west along that route would kill you, your family, your children, and your horses if you were even remotely as soft and city-acclimated as I am. In the Dust Bowl era, Route 66 was used by thousands to flee the man-made environmental disaster wherein farms and banks collapsed while cows and farmers died. After World War I, agricultural prices, which had been inflated by war demand, returned to a more normal international standard. Prices dropped out, farmers had no money to plant for the next year, and so the overworked soil blew away, blew into clouds of hot dirt so big they once blackened the skies of Washington, D.C. These environmental refugees were the first to give Route 66 its importance. And then finally in the 1950s, America celebrated the end of another world war by turning its massive industrial might inward towards sport and pleasure, taming the ancient desert with malt shops and gas stations. But then the freeways came and pulled all but the vagabonds and adventurers and locals off of Route 66, and none of us fuckers ever have much money. So today the road is littered with the ruins of that gone-away prosperity. But there are quirks of time at work. After decades out of business, the iconic 50s gas station in Amboy, California, reopened for business because when drivers put the Avoid Freeways filter on their global positioning systems for the route between San Diego or Los Angeles to Las Vegas, most GPS will instruct drivers to use this stretch of Old 66 as an alternate. And so a trickle of drivers became a light flow, but at least they were drivers with money. A gas station here made sense, economic sense, for the first time since the freeways dealt America's mother road its mortal wound. Route 66 today exists only in fragments, 100 miles here, 200 miles there. In some places the freeway goes over where the historic byway used to go. In many cases the road was simply demolished. But in the sparse emptiness of the desert, many of the original shards remain. A tourist economy near to bigger cities like Kingman sells Route 66 merchandise and Route 66 hamburgers and Route 66 motel rooms if only you'll pull over and open your wallet. It's a fetishization of a symbol, of freedom, of the open road, of an America where the land blooms wide like a flower for the American tourist. Here's the truth. Route 66 is a dusty old strip of asphalt that swoops across the red dirt of ancient seabeds, and it is never bouncing back from its grave. We give it symbolic power, but it is rarely the most scenic road. We give it historical power, but the circumstances of its heyday are as sunken into the weeds and blowing dust as its decommissioned road sections. I, too, nostalgically long for an America like we see on television. But we never had it. It has always been a symbolic illusion. Route 66 during the Dust Bowl was a refugee trail for rural America. It was a river of struggle and heartbreak before it was ever the carefree highway to fun that the old big bands made it out to be. That fun lasted just a little while, a couple paltry decades. And then the wind and the sun and the despondency began to slowly work their feats of erosion once again. It wouldn't have been Texas if one of us didn't get into a fight, but I certainly didn't expect it to be Simon the dog. After Big Bend, we made a beeline for Austin, where a friend of Kendra's was using her spring break to fly out and spend a week there with us. We were staying at a campground on the periphery of the city the night before the friend arrived, and I was taking Simon for his night walk. In the darkness, these two big eyes reflect back from my flashlight, and it startles the hell out of me, but the eyes don't move, just growling and eyes. Well, the dog's chained up, I figure, and I keep walking. Not a minute later, the dog came after Simon. He went right for the neck. It happened so quickly that it took me a couple seconds to figure out how bad it was, and the strange dog wouldn't let go no matter how much yelling or slapping or anything. So it did something I've never done before and never had considered that I might need to do, and I punched the dog in the top of its head, which did make him let go. And then I knelt on the dog, screaming for help. The owner came out long minutes after a crowd had formed in response to my yelling, and found that his dog had bitten through its leash and come running after Simon. He went with us to a 24-hour vet and paid for Simon's vet bill, which was respectable, but the whole evening was terrible. For the other owner, too. He had been on his phone inside of his tent with his dog tied up. He had just gotten the dog a couple weeks ago, and the vet bill was not remotely cheap. His dog fractured Simon's sternum and chewed through the skin in 3 places.